Today, we have got some outstanding investors, entrepreneurs, and all those who are involved in the ecosystem who represent the promise of entrepreneurship, not only in Jordan, but the whole MENA. Entrepreneurship creates new jobs and new businesses, new ways to deliver basic services, new ways of seeing the world. It's the spark of prosperity. It helps citizens stand up for their own rights and push back against corruption and fill the void when young people don't see a future for themselves. Entrepreneurship means ownership and self-determination, as opposed to simply being dependent on somebody else for your livelihood and your future. Entrepreneurship brings down barriers between communities and cultures, builds bridges that help us to take on common challenges together. Because one thing that entrepreneurs understand is that you don't have to be of a certain color, a certain faith, or a certain last name in order to have a great idea. The challenge, as so many of you know, of course, is often hard to take those first steps. It's hard to access capital. It's hard sometimes to get training and skills to run a business as professionally as it needs to be in this competitive world. It's hard to tap into the networks and mentors that can mean the difference between a venture taking off and that falls flat. And that's why MENA ICT is here. Let me tell you some good news. During 2022, over 2.2 billion USD billion is VC investments across MENA, with fintech and then e-commerce as the top two startup sectors receiving funding. In 2021, they claimed it was a record year of exits. But look at 2022. We are still at the third quarter, and yet we've broken the record. More than 56 exits so far. 9 at the e-commerce startups, 7 at the retail, and then fintech, transport, and logistics, and enterprise software industries, including SaaS-based. It's good for all of us. This region needs to be a future hub of global growth, and the country that is hosting us today is setting an important example of startups that could grow beyond. Here in the room, we have outstanding investors. Where are the investors? Show me your hand. Potential investors. Okay, so entrepreneurs. If you see them, those who already raised their hands, don't be shy. Pin them down. Get their advice. Go and pitch your idea. That's why they are here. And don't be discouraged if, they say, that is not really, we don't think it's gonna work. If they ask you some tough questions. Because one of the things every one of these successful entrepreneurs will tell you is that along with incredible success, they have had some failures as well. They have learned them, but they haven't given up. So as you are here today, please take the advantage of being here with all these investors from all around the world, with all other entrepreneurs, your peers. I want you all to know that MENA ICT is your opportunity. You have the drive and the passion to change the world, to unlock new solutions to the pressing global challenges. I personally believe that. Everyone in this room does believe that you will make these innovations and will make life better. Thank you so much again for your time, for being here. Let's start this conversation with my colleague, Ziad Al-Masri, who will be giving us an overview around the entrepreneurship startup map in Jordan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Razan. What time do you have?
It's 11.
So check your mobiles, check your B2 match application. It's 11:05, 11:06, something like that. Thank you for the amazing intro, Razan. Thank you all for being here. The startup ecosystem at large, thank you. The VCs, the entrepreneurs, the incubators, the accelerators, the founders, the to-be founders, thank you very much. Thank you also for the startups that are from Jordan, but a special thanks for the startups that have traveled from Iraq, from Saudi Arabia through Munshaat Tumuh program, from Lebanon, from Algeria, from Egypt, and of course, from Palestine. The Palestinian startups, they have double the trouble. They need to convince the investors, and they need also to convince the investors to invest in occupied startups. It was very difficult for them to even to get to Jordan over the past couple of days. How did you see the metaverse intro about an hour ago? The question is, from the VCs, in 3 years' time, who's going to invest in metaverse? Can you show of hands? Is it still too early, the metaverse, to invest in? So startups, individuals, founders, the investors are not ready. But it does not mean they're right. It does not mean you cannot challenge their thinking. And before we go to the next panel, I want to give you an update on the Jordanian startup map. As you know, we launched the Jordanian startup map in 2021, in February. It was a study carried out by Intaj and Startups Joe on behalf of Orange for Innovation Space Project funded by the European Union. We had an update in November 21 and another update in February 22. Today on Startups Joe, we've got around 440 startups that are included in the Jordanian startup map. 19% of them are in e-commerce, and that's where most of the startups are, around 200 sub-verticals in the Jordanian startups. Then come EdTech, other new focus areas and new markets, creative art, media, data AI, and machine learning. Then comes FinTech and Health Tech, and the rest of the different sub-verticals. A lot of these verticals are not covered, not only in Jordan as startups, but also across the region. There's a huge opportunity in the verticals that are not covered and nobody's really looking at. If we look at just some stats for you, from the 440 startups, 55% of them are registered officially in Jordan, 42% are not registered at all, and 1 to 2% are registered throughout the Gulf and offshore. In the startup stage, 40% of them are in early growth. MVP is 17%, growth 17%, and 16% in the idea stage. The workforce, there's approximately 4,000 individuals, founders, employees, co-founders working in the 440 startups. 46% of them females, especially a lot of them are co-founders and leading the startups. And on average, there's 9 employees per startup. Let's look at the startup funding. And this is where it becomes interesting. 42% come from their own savings. Friends and family, 15%, grants, 10%. And if we look at angel investors, 7%, and then VCs, 3%. So around 10 to 12% of the startups are being invested in by the VCs. So there's a lot of work to do. Hopefully, over the next 2 days, you can meet them. As a reminder, the Investor Lounge is in Mount Nebo, which is across the hall, past the exhibition area. It will be on your right, on the same floor, not upstairs, on the same floor. That's where the Investor Lounge is. With ArabNet, who are our partners in the Investor Lounge, they've all contacted you. You've got pre-confirmed meetings, and then hopefully the startups can, in addition, to make more meetings with you. This is going to be available very, very soon on Startups Joe, which we just launched in cooperation and supported by the ISSF. Thank you again. Looking forward over the next 2 days for you to engage between VCs, between startups, and if you need anything, Intaj is at your disposal. And Razan will leave it to you now. Thank you.
Okay, let's start the day. Worldwide investment trends have slowed down. True, also for the MENA region. However, new funds have entered and the startup exits are increasing. Nearly every day, there is a new announcement. What does the future look like? Today, only a few international funds operate in the region. Is it expected to increase? How will this affect the ecosystem, pipelines, and valuation? Our next session is about the MENA investment climate, moderated by His Excellency Marwan Juma, Chairman of Oasis, and our speakers are Qais Al-Isa and Alaya Bettaieb. Please welcome my speakers.
Salty Wasser, you're good. We're good. Good to have you with us. At the outset, I apologize for the flies and for non-Jordanians for the change of time. So it is now 11 o'clock, 11:15 actually, to be precise. So we're 10 minutes behind. So we'll try to pick up steam here. I think for those of you who know me, I think I see many friends here. I'm not going to speak much about myself, but I've been in the IT sector the past 33 years. I've had my share of good stories and bad ones, good investments and bad ones. I was in government for a short while as Minister of Telecom, went back to being an entrepreneur, back to my roots. But for those of you who know me, I speak a lot, so I think Intaj, to handle the situation, made me a moderator. So this way I cannot speak much. So I'll kick off the session, and we had a small email exchange about with Alaya and with Qais. Instead of the formalities, I asked them a bit about themselves, a bit more personal questions to get to know them a bit more. I thought I had a decent CV, but then when I read their CVs, Qais's BBS was launched when he was basically in school, and you launched experimental rockets when you were young. So I thought I had a decent CV. So, but let's start with the official introductions and start the questions, the dialogue. I'll start with Qais, who is managing partner and the CEO, founding partner at Vision Ventures. He's had his share of investments over the past 2 decades in startups. Currently, I think on your portfolio about 50 companies on your portfolio, yes. and growing. And you're launching your second fund now, and you're doing quite well. I know you're raising funds and doing so successfully in a very difficult environment. So great to have you with us.
Shukran.
And with Alaya, basically, Alaya, your experience as well, being an entrepreneur and having raised funds, but experience is primarily being on the government side now, I think, more on the public sector side.
Public sector side, too.
At Smart Capital, Startup Tunisia. Basically, I'm going to read what exactly you do. It's a national operator of startups, Tunisia project, managing 3 pillars. One is a Startup Act, and we'll discuss Startup Act that you have in Tunisia, and its packages of incentives for entrepreneurs and startups. You also have under your umbrella almost 800 startups now that you cater for in Tunisia, and you're managing a 200 million euro fund, if I'm not mistaken. Fund of funds. So similar paths, all of us here, whether in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Tunisia. But before I start the questions I had put down, I'll start with a more general question for both of you. These are not the best of times. We've seen valuations basically come down by 80-90% over the past 2 years. We've seen a pullback. We've seen major companies cutting back on their resources. Even today, we're hearing Amazon maybe laying off about 10,000 employees. So given this overall, not the best of scenarios, do you believe this is short-lived? We will go back to where we were in the past in a couple of years? How does this impact fundraising and investing in companies and the overall outlook and its impact on the region. So I'll leave it to you, Qais, and then we'll go to Alaya.
طيب السلام عليكم جميعا. أول شيء thank you to Intaj for inviting us and having this session. Thank you Marwan for the moderation. يعطيك العافية. أول شيء can we have raise of hands for the attendees? But let's have an idea of the kind of attendees we have today. Startups مثلا أيوة.
Still, VCs.
Startups raising خلينا نقول. Startups raising. شوف في ناس نزلوا يدهم. So they have money. Good. Okay. طيب VCs. So also you have a lot of VCs ترى in the room, huh? الحمد لله. طيب so going back to the question of the session, I think we all know ups and downs happen in financial markets, صح? So this is normal. It happens. It has happened in the past. At least I think this time it's happening a little bit stronger than some of the at least past short periods. From our point of view, I think the investors in the region themselves, and again probably the most let's say well-established VCs that know what they are doing, have not stopped investing. We have not stopped investing, for example, and I know a number of other investors in the MENA region have not stopped investing. Now, on the other side, definitely the hit has been from international investors. And this has been, I mean, our region has been, I think, doing very well in terms of early stage investments, getting startups invested in the beginnings. But then when they go to the growth stage, a lot of them needed capital from international players to fuel those bigger rounds and get them closed. And I think this is where the problem happened. And I think this is where we noticeably see several rounds either fall off the cliff, get delayed, and again those have severe negative impacts on the startups that are basically fueled by that fundraising that they are raising. Now, on the other side, I think also these difficult times bring up opportunities. And I think this is let's say, the positive side of the coin. At least from our point of view, we continue to invest. And as I said, a lot of other investors continue to invest in the region. And I think, at least my own opinion probably is that the international investors will see the region differently very soon. And I think they will put even more money in the region, because our region is really very promising and has very high growth rates compared to the European market, or even to the US market, or even to the Far East today, which is ahead of us.
How long do you expect this to last? Is this something?
Well, we don't know, and I think anybody who can estimate a time frame or predict a time frame is shooting in the dark. But I think, I mean, typically financial cycles have a time frame. And I think probably 2 years. I mean, this is my estimation, or our own estimation, is probably the next 2 years. So 23 probably. I think mid 24 things should come back, inshallah, to normal, or even earlier than that. Really, we don't know. But I think it's very good, and it's very important that we all stay very optimistic. We all stay humble. We keep working on our startups. We keep working within our environment and culture. And get things moving forward, because that's the only way we have, and we have no other choice. And I think really we had a problem also. So one problem we had was very high, and at least let's say in Saudi and probably in some of the other GCC countries, we started to see in the past 2 years unreasonable valuations. But the market was going up. Things were good. Nobody could negotiate, valuations. I think now today, at least for us, we see it an opportunity. revaluations are becoming much more acceptable. Yeah.
Okay. Your point of view.
Thank you, Juma. I'd like really to give the point of view of VC. I've been in the field for almost 2 decades and more. And I've been living, these ups and downs, a lot of time.
Sorry, can we close the door, please, in the back? Do you mind closing the door so we can? Thank you.
But I like really to link it to the sourcing and to the opportunities. At the beginning, in the beginning of the 2000, frankly speaking, I was really raising funds. It was very difficult, really, to raise because of the opportunity. They don't see, in the market, a lot of startups, a lot of innovative, companies. So it was really difficult. In the mid 2010, 12, etc. So the number is really increasing a little bit, and the raising was much easier. In Tunisia, since we created, the Startup Act in 2016, think about it, promulgated in 2018, and implemented in 2019. We start really, after really, the law is really giving the incentives for the entrepreneur, for the investor, and for the startup. The number of startups in Tunisia start really increasing. Last month, we reached 800 innovative and scalable startups. The fundraising was much easier because the VCs are really seeing opportunity in the market. And I can really give, I'm sorry, Juma, to give, some figures. I was really in the region, as I said, for the last 2 decades. When I go, and till today, when I go, for example, to Saudi Arabia, there is a lot of money, but there is few startups. The valuation is really high. In our region, North Africa, there is not a lot of money, but there is some opportunities. The valuation, is weak because of the lack of funding. In the US, there is plenty of money, and also there is plenty of startups. The market is balanced. There is, the valuation is really balanced. In our region, the valuation is not really balanced. We give, a lot of money to the few startups, so the valuation is extremely high. In Tunisia, we consider that it's really better to start by the sourcing, create the ecosystem, create, the incentives in order that those creative and innovative entrepreneurs show up. Once they show up, we label them. You are recognized as innovative and scalable. And today we recognize 800. We are starting also creating funds. The valuation is very, very normal. We don't really give extra money to these startups because we have plenty of startups in the system. So since the beginning, we thought about the valuation problem.
Okay.
And since the beginning, we thought about the sourcing, which is key really to be able really to master and to manipulate the market.
You mentioned that the Startup Act in Tunisia was an inflection point for you, for your industry.
Yes.
But these, if you can see the 4 points that I had written in thinking about this session, what do investors look for when they look at a particular region or country? I think the first thing they look at, in my opinion, and this has been feedback from many of the investors and the startups themselves, the first thing an investor looks for is a market. Yeah. Is there a market, and is there a return on money? Because capital has options today. If money doesn't grow, it will go elsewhere. So I think the first thing that will bring investors, if there's a market, yeah, and if the costs are under control, return on investment that's decent. The second thing, particularly in our sector, is can I find talent? Can I find talent for development? Can I find talent for creation of IP? That's what they look for. The third thing I think they look at the regulatory regime, and they look at transparency and rule of law. So you mentioned the regulatory issue as being a catalyst.
Yes.
But what about the first two in Tunisia? What markets are you focusing on in particular? Because here in our part of the world, especially in Jordan, many of our companies look at the Gulf naturally. They look at Saudi Arabia as a natural market because of size and scale. Some even go beyond. But what's your positioning in terms of?
In Tunisia, the historical market of Tunisia is Europe. Since 1976, Tunisia
has remained so.
Tunisia has a free trade agreement with Europe. So whatever investor, regardless of his nationality, he has free access to Europe.
Okay.
So the Tunisian talents, when they create their startups, obviously they are really thinking internationally. Tunisian market is 10 to 12 million inhabitants. So the market is always small.
Very small.
So in their mindset, since the first day they think international.
Okay.
In our structure of the fund of fund, we are targeting Europe, of course, this is natural, but we are also targeting MEA, Middle East and Africa. And today, I mean, most of the accompanying and the backing of startup is guided, I mean, toward, I mean, these two markets. And you've been really mentioning, I mean, the access of market as the first, what the investor is really looking for. This is true. And in fact, when we label startup, two conditions to be labeled, consider them as, is innovation and scalability.
And scalability. Yep.
Scalability is key. Without scalability, we cannot. So when you have, I mean, this kind of scalable startup, I mean, in the market, next, I mean, we are really creating the funds. All of them are really, I mean, how to say, going really to harvest all the efforts that we've been really making for the last 3 years.
Okay. Guys, back to Saudi Arabia. We all know the country has done amazing work the past 4 or 5 years in terms of the changes on the ground, actual implementation of reform, in terms of positioning Saudi Arabia as becoming a hub now, more and more investors choosing Saudi Arabia as a destination. What's remaining to be done? And in terms of, what about the quality of manpower in terms of IP and actual creation of developing applications? Are you still relying more on talent from elsewhere, or is this something that Saudi Arabia is also addressing?
Great question. So I think, going back a few years, if I just go back probably 5 years, not longer than that, the whole movement that we have today in Saudi Arabia was not yet there. So it's really amazing to see what can be achieved if there is the government real intention and programs on the ground that are being implemented, along with a ready startup scene, entrepreneur scene that believes in those opportunities going forward. A market that is of that kind of size, as you just mentioned, the market size is really important. But also for us, one of the things that are very important really is the entrepreneurs themselves. For us is number one criteria, and among other criterias, of course, that we look at.
Are all your investments in Saudi Arabia?
No. We are MENA focused. We have investments, by the way, in Jordan. Yesterday, I just signed a new investment that we will inshallah announce soon in Jordan. So yeah, we have investments in Jordan, in Egypt, in UAE, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in the Moroccan countries. So yeah, we're all over the MENA region. Wherever there is a good opportunity, wherever there are entrepreneurs that can break barriers, and a market that makes sense of sizable, we will go there. So coming back to the question, I think what the whole region needs is really cross-border collaboration, much more, from cross-border collaboration. And I talked about this a few years back. I wrote an article about it, and I compared ourselves or the region to the US, to China, and what's missing? What are we missing? Why can't we go to those bigger, valuations? Why can't our companies reach billion-dollar, unicorn status as easy as they do in the US? And of course, there are many obvious reasons, but some of them are not in our hands. So I think the whole region needs to collaborate more, and in each country I can see a lot of strengths, but also weaknesses, definitely.
Can you try to be a bit more specific in terms when you say the region collaborate more? Are you
talking
about what governments can do? Or
I think governments, but I think also we need to do more ourselves. So I think governments want to do a lot, but again, intergovernment collaboration takes time. So we need to do more. So let's just talk about what each country has. So if we start with Saudi Arabia today has an economy that's flourishing, a very strong market, a very ready infrastructure, and users that are highly consumers, high consumers that are willing to spend. And in every category, probably one of the categories, for example, is gaming. In our investment with Tamatam, we see that Tamatam again is a Jordanian company. We see that Saudi Arabian users are the highest among the world. spending per capita, you know, per user. And we want to capitalize on this. So Saudi Arabia has great entrepreneurs and has market size that can bring big, huge companies to the market. I think what Jordan has is amazing talent, technical talent. And I think this is not new. This has been rooted since
our selling point.
Yeah, since many years. And it's true. And I mean, and I have been here several years, many times. And this is the strength I see here. And again, this is the kind of collaboration we want to see. If we look at Egypt, it's the amazing, huge population size, you know, out there. You know, again, each country has something to offer. Maybe, you know, the Moroccan region has these ties with Europe. So that international access, that is easier bridge, you know, to go to European and expand international. So again, you know, we need to act. We need to put things together ourselves. And again, as VCs, as, you know, fund of funds from different countries, we need to really collaborate, work together, and try to capitalize on the strengths.
I mean, the new age entrepreneurs, they don't look at borders.
Yeah,
their stakeholders can be anywhere. Their clients can be anywhere.
True.
Their employees can be anywhere. They can work from anywhere. So their vendors can be anywhere. So this notion that you have to work in a given country with a given audience, that has changed. It's not that it's changing. And Corona was an inflection point in terms of relying more on hybrid models, employing people in different places. So this notion that I work in a given country doesn't, which means opportunity, I always say it, opportunity is global, but so is competition. What do you think, do you see anything that we lack in terms of our entrepreneurs, or are we at par with players, with entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley? Is there a component that we need to address?
No, definitely, definitely.
That's a question to both of you.
I mean, maturity in entrepreneurs takes time. And it's not something we can fuel with money. It's not something we can, you know, very much do anything about. And I think part of it, of course, can be sponsored by government programs, can be supported by government programs, can be helped by such meetings and discussions. But also it takes a bit of time, and we need to understand that.
The market's still young anyway.
I mean, yeah, the whole region is still young. Yeah. We didn't have, and I think one of the things that Europe and US benefit a lot of is that, you know, entrepreneurs come, quickly ramp up a company, exit this company, so they have a huge learning curve, let's say in 5 to 7 years and maybe 10 years, and now they start their second startup. And again, that startup doesn't take 10 years to reach $1 billion. It takes probably 5 years or even less, and so on. So I think we need to see more success stories in our region. We need to see more exits so that those entrepreneurs have that great knowledge to go somewhere else. So one of the companies we see here today that's doing this is Kareem. So Kareem helped a lot the region to bring out a lot of really talented, experienced entrepreneurs that have ambition, huge ambition. I'm not just thinking of making a $100 million company. I'm now thinking of a multi-billion-dollar company because he saw it's possible, and he was part of it.
Okay. Well, yes. I was the same question, but I'd also like for you to touch upon your Startup Act. Yeah. In terms, just in 1 minute, what are the key articles or the key components of your act, and how does it make a difference, and how do you even define a startup? Because we were having issues in defining what a startup is, anyways. Yeah. So how definitions, the value proposition, and in terms of does Tunisia have what it takes to compete?
In fact, if I start with one of the most important elements, in the Startup Act is that Startup Act is giving incentives to whatever startup is really willing to set base in Tunisia, regardless of their nationality. Today we have 22 nationalities in Tunisia.
How do you define a startup?
The startup, we had definition with 5 elements. The size of the number of personnel, less than 10 to start. Okay. And the number of years, less than 2 to start.
Number of years is
less than 2 to start. And of 2 to 8, if you're likely to receive, advantage. and also the capitalization of the company, less than 15 million Tunisian dinar, $5 million roughly. But the most important thing from the definition are an additional two, which are innovation and scalability. If you are innovative and scalable, you are
But who decides if you're innovative?
There is a college. There is a college, that means the committee,
And
of 9 independent people, highly recognized, in Tunisia, like you, in Jordan, being a serial entrepreneur who run, their startup for a long, and they know what's the business of a startup. So this college is independent. Nobody interfere, in the decision.
And once you're selected and you're under the umbrella, what do you get? What incentives do you get?
There is a package of 22 incentives. Kind of scholarship, for example, to run your business for 2 years. Scholarship. You can receive up to 5,000 Tunisian dinar. $1.5 thousand. You can also have fiscal incentives, financial incentives. Social security is paid for you for as far as you are labeled. Up to 8 years.
Up to 8 years is covered.
8 years. Yeah, you can really receive all this. Security, and also we encourage you really to make a joint venture with international startups. If an international startup is in your capital, you will be labeled. So this is also another advantage, which is quite encouraging for many. The Startup Act is encouraging a lot of investors, and business angels, of course, to invest, because there is fiscal incentives and financial incentives for investors. Family office has been really growing in Tunisia after 2019. Family offices are investing in our child funds. We are a fund of funds, so we invest in child funds. These child funds, there is family office in Tunisia who are running, classical business before, and they're young, their children are now really getting committed, to technology, and they are investing, on startups. They became business angels, and also they invest, in funds. The mindset is really changing, in Tunisia. Besides the fact that within the last 2 years, we have 2 excellent startups, who raise, spectacular amount of money, $100 million and above. And this also is really changing, the mindset in Tunisia. Recently, there is one startup in the artificial intelligence also raising a lot of money. We see the trend also in the application and the candidacy for the startups. Most of them are claiming, working on artificial intelligence. So these things is really happening. So, and we hope, of course, that in the future, our objective is by the year 2024 and 2024 to reach 1,000 labeled startup and 1 unicorn, hopefully.
And we were in Lisbon. Some of you may have attended the Web Summit that took place in Portugal a couple of weeks ago. And everyone, the same theme, what we're talking about today. But what caught my attention was some of the founders were saying that in terms of what has happened recently with valuations coming down, and in one of the panels, one of the founders said, I'm not concerned, I don't care, because I'm in it for the long term. I'm not in it to exit after 1 or 2 years. I'm not in it to build the company and to cash out after 3 years. I'm in it in the long term. So valuations, that's for investors to worry about. That's for VCs to worry about. As a founder, as the one who built the business, I'm not concerned. Of course, I'm less concerned about valuation than VCs. So what do you think about this position? And do you see, I've seen a pattern, and I've been quite vocal about this. What I'm seeing, it's in Jordan and the region and beyond, where entrepreneurs spend, I think, a bit too much time talking to funds versus running their business. And I think if you run your business properly and you're able to generate traction and you're selling traditionally and you're creating revenue, funds will come to you. So that delicate balance between, of course, talking to funds is important, and myself being a chairman of one of the largest accelerators in the region, funds are important because funds help you grow faster. But there is that delicate balance between taking care of your business and generating revenue on your own versus going from one fund to the other. So how do you see that balancing act in terms of the two and the issue of valuations again? To both of you, of course.
Yeah, in fact, I know the Japanese example. In fact, a patient investors or long-term investors. This is generally most of the government, I mean, in some parts of the world, like Japan, are really doing. In Japan, I mean, the funds, they have 25 years old, I mean, the time. So they are extremely patient. I mean, seeing, I mean, a private investor thinking, I mean, that way, it's something very new. Me personally, I consider a VC is somebody who invests and get out.
They have
To short term, to really to give the opportunity to other startup, really, because if say, I mean, a long time, probably he won't really give another opportunity for that. This is a new trend, of course, to be studied and to be considered, I mean, in order how really to, probably it is good for life science, because life science, as most of you know, I mean, it's time consuming and capital intensive, so probably patient investors like this, probably we need it on these activities.
So we are patient investors, by the way.
How long?
All of us in
we can stay 7 years.
We're all very
we're fine
patient
staying
investors.
7 years. 7 to 10 years. I have no problem doing that, as well as long as we have an excellent
That is
exit.
very normal, very normal.
Yeah, but I mean, going back to your point, Marwan, I think it's interesting that you mentioned it. So tomorrow we will have a session here that Vision, we will talk about Vision Ventures and how to raise capital at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Of course, you're all welcome to attend. And one of the points is, it says specifically, don't chase investors on the expense of running your company. So I actually mentioned that, and I'm an investor, and I want to see you, of course, and I want you to chase me. I mean, of course, I want to have that discussion, but also, as you said, Marwan, I think you had the point really very well. Don't overdo it. Don't, do it on the expense of your business. Your business is the most important thing. You want to see it flourish. You want to see it really, you want to put a lot of your effort or most of your effort into that, most of your time into that, to build something great, to build something sustainable in the long run. And again, if you think that way, I think, as you said, valuations will not matter. What matters most is who are my investors and who is going to join me
Who will join you?
in
What
this
kind of
ride,
investment?
in this journey. And I think it's a journey. And when we talk about it, I always talk about it, it's like, and excuse me for that, but it's like a marriage, frankly speaking. I'm going to have someone who will be on my shoulders for a longer period of time, questioning my, or helping me probably, but also questioning my performance. And I have been through that. I have been, as an entrepreneur, getting investments, and I went through that. So
Okay.
I know how.
So we'll hear about that tomorrow at 2.
Yeah, we will hear more about that.
I'm being told to be quiet, but I'm going to put rank on you and continue for 2 minutes. Quickly, as we close, both of you are investing in startups, investing in companies at different stages. I think more at the younger stage. What is it? The one thing you look for in an entrepreneur? And don't give me the typical answer, passion. Give me, what is it you really look for when you evaluate a startup? Both of you.
If I may start, so I think first of all, I think we want to be optimistic, and I think this is very important, really. This building a company is not an easy thing. It's a hard job. It takes a lot of your energy, a lot of your time, and you will go through difficult times for sure. If you think otherwise, don't get even into this field. But on the positive side, 2020 we reached MENA 1 billion, 2021 2.6, if I'm not mistaken. 2022 we're, by the way, on track to hit 3.3 billion in the MENA region. And I think these numbers are things to celebrate, things to be proud of as a region. And I think we're getting to a size that makes us noticeable internationally. Okay. And I think that will continue. Now, going back to what we look for really strong, resilient founders that will face difficult situations like what we're going through today, and go through them, go through walls, go through difficulties, break barriers, and be more committed.
Okay, Alaya, and your
being resilient and ready for change. really.
I think this applies to all of us living in this region, just being resilient and being able to pivot. Pivoting is not easy.
Yes.
It can be painful, it can be costly, but those who can change and pivot eventually survive. So again, I'd like to thank you for your wonderful input for this session, and it's good to have you with us again. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.